The accusation. James Carter pushed his cleaning cart down the gleaming corridor of Meridian Station, the soft hum of the wheels echoing in the empty hallway. The station's artificial gravity felt heavier tonight, or maybe that was just the weight of his thoughts pressing down on his shoulders. 5 years ago, he had walked these same corridors wearing an engineer's uniform, respected and valued. Now he wore the gray coveralls of maintenance staff, invisible to most who passed by. The station floated in the neutral zone between Earth territory and the Valkyrian sovereignty, a massive structure of metal and glass that represented humanity's greatest achievement in interstellar cooperation. Humans and Valkyrians worked side by side here, sharing technology and knowledge. At least that was the official story. The reality was more complicated, filled with suspicion and unspoken hierarchies. James stopped at a ventilation grate and knelt down, pulling out his sensor pad. This was his routine now, checking environmental systems during the night shift when most of the station slept. He had been doing this for 3 years, ever since the accident that ended his career as an aerospace engineer. The memory still stung, a prototype engine that exploded during testing, injuring 2 colleagues. The inquiry had cleared him of criminal negligence, but his reputation was destroyed. No engineering firm would hire him after that. The sensor pad beeped softly. James frowned, studying the readings. The energy signature was off, subtle but definitely wrong. He had noticed it 3 nights ago, a slight fluctuation in the radiation levels near the residential sectors. Nothing alarming enough to trigger automatic alerts, but his trained eye recognized the pattern. Something was leaking energy where it shouldn't be. He moved to the next checkpoint, his cart squeaking slightly. The residential wing was quiet at this hour, families sleeping behind closed doors. James had always been meticulous in his work, perhaps too meticulous for a janitor. But old habits died hard, and his engineering instincts refused to fade despite his change in status. As he approached the diplomatic quarters, a sound caught his attention. Soft crying, the kind a child makes when trying to be quiet. James paused, listening. The sound came from the recreation area, a common space where station children played during the day. He shouldn't investigate, he knew that. Maintenance staff were supposed to stay invisible, avoid interaction with residents unless absolutely necessary. But the crying tugged at something in his chest. James abandoned his cart and walked toward the recreation area. The lights were dimmed for night mode, casting long shadows across the colorful play equipment. In the corner, sitting on a small bench, was a Valkyrian child. He recognized her immediately as Xena, daughter of Ambassador Kalira, one of the most powerful diplomats on the station. The girl was perhaps 8 years old in human terms, though Valkyrian aging was different. Her skin had the characteristic pale blue tint of her species, and her large amber eyes reflected the low light like a cat's. But something was wrong. Even in the dim illumination, James could see strange patterns on her exposed arms, like frost forming on glass. Crystalline formations that seemed to pulse with a faint internal light. His engineering mind immediately clicked into analytical mode. Those patterns, that luminescence, he had seen something similar before in his studies of exotic radiation effects. His heart rate accelerated as the pieces fell into place. "Are you all right?" James asked softly, approaching slowly so as not to startle her. Xena looked up, surprised. Her amber eyes were wet with tears. "My arms hurt," she whispered. "They feel strange, like they're buzzing inside." James knelt down to her level, his mind racing. Buzzing sensation, cristalline formation, fin luminescence. Every instinct screamed danger. "How long have you felt this way?" he asked gently. 3 days, Xena replied, wiping her eyes. "I didn't tell Mother. She's been so busy with the treaty negotiations. I didn't want to bother her." 3 days. The same time frame as the energy fluctuations he had detected. It couldn't be a coincidence. James knew he needed to verify his suspicion, but touching an alien child without permission was a serious breach of protocol. Especially the daughter of an ambassador. He could be arrested, deported, or worse. But if he was right about what was happening, this child was in immediate danger. Every moment mattered. "Xena, I need to check something," James said carefully. "I'm going to touch your arm very gently. It won't hurt, I promise. Is that okay?" The girl nodded, trusting in the way children do. James reached out slowly, his fingers hovering over the crystalline formations on her forearm. The moment his skin made contact, he felt it, a subtle vibration that confirmed his worst fears. Ion radiation poisoning. It was rare, nearly impossible to detect with standard medical scanners because it operated on a quantum frequency that most equipment couldn't register. But human nerve endings, particularly those trained in sensitive engineering work, could feel the characteristic vibration. He had written a paper on it during his graduate studies, theoretical research on exotic radiation types. Thorion radiation came from improperly shielded fusion cores, and it was lethal. If left untreated, the crystallization would spread throughout the body, turning soft tissue into fragile mineral structures. Death was inevitable once it reached vital organs. "Zena, listen to me very carefully," James said, keeping his voice calm despite the adrenaline flooding his system. "You're sick, but I know what's wrong. I need to get you to medical right now." Before he could say more, the lights suddenly blazed to full brightness. James blinked against the glare, his hand still resting on Zena's arm. When his vision cleared, he saw Ambassador Kalira standing in the doorway, flanked by 2 station security officers. The ambassador was tall and imposing, her blue skin darker than her daughter's, marking her as an elder of her species. She wore the formal robes of her office, suggesting she had been working late in the diplomatic chambers. Her amber eyes, so like Zena's, blazed with fury. "Step away from my daughter immediately," Kalira commanded, her voice cold and sharp as broken glass. James stood up slowly, raising his hands. "Ambassador, please listen. Your daughter is experiencing thorion radiation poisoning. She needs immediate medical attention." "How dare you?" Kalira hissed, striding forward and pulling Zena behind her protectively. "How dare you lay your human hands on my child?" "Mother, he was helping," Zena tried to say, but Kalira silenced her with a gesture. One of the security officers, a burly human named Rodriguez, grabbed James's arm roughly. "Sir, you're under arrest for unauthorized physical contact with a minor." "You don't understand," James protested, trying to keep his voice level. "There's a radiation leak somewhere in this station. Your daughter has been exposed. So have others probably. You need to scan for thorion radiation specifically." "Thorion radiation?" Kalira's expression mixed contempt with disbelief. "That's a theoretical hazard, not a real threat. Our medical team scans for all dangerous radiation types daily. Standard scans won't detect it," James insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. "It operates on a quantum frequency. You need specialized equipment or someone trained to recognize the symptoms. I'm that someone. I studied this in graduate school before I became an engineer." "Before you became a disgraced engineer," Kalira corrected coldly. "Yes, I know who you are, Mr. Carter. The man whose carelessness injured 2 people. And now I find you alone with my daughter, touching her without permission, spinning wild theories to justify your violation." The accusation hit James like a physical blow. The old wound, never fully healed, tore open again. "That accident was investigated. I was cleared." "Cleared of criminal charges?" Kalira said. "Not cleared of incompetence. Security, remove this man from the station immediately. I want him processed and deported within the hour." "Ambassador, please," James tried one more time. "Look at your daughter's arms. Those crystalline formations, the way they pulse. Ask her about the buzzing sensation. These are textbook symptoms. If you don't treat her soon, the crystallization will spread to her internal organs. She has maybe 72 hours before it becomes irreversible." For just a moment, uncertainty flickered across Kalira's face. She glanced down at Zena, really looking at her daughter's arms for the first time. The crystalline patterns were more visible now under the bright lights, spreading like delicate frost across the blue skin. But the moment passed. The ambassador's expression hardened again. "My daughter has a minor skin condition, nothing more. Our family physician examined her yesterday. Your attempt to frighten me into believing your fantasy is pathetic and transparent." Rodriguez pulled James toward the door. The other security officer, a Valkyrian female, stayed with the ambassador and Zena. James struggled briefly, then forced himself to stop. Fighting would only make things worse. "Check the ventilation systems near the fusion core," James called back as Rodriguez hauled him away. "The radiation is coming from there. And check other children on the station. If Zena has been exposed, others have too. Please, Ambassador. I don't care what happens to me, but save your daughter." His words echoed down the corridor as the security officer dragged him away. Ambassador Kalira stood rigid, one hand on her daughter's shoulder, watching the human janitor disappear around the corner. Her expression revealed nothing, but her grip on Zena tightened slightly. James was processed with efficient brutality. His personal belongings were confiscated, his station access revoked. They locked him in a small holding cell in the security wing, a sparse room with a metal bench and a narrow window looking out into space. Through the transparent aluminum, he could see Earth in the distance, a blue marble that had once been his home. He sat on the bench, head in his hands, mind churning. Had he been wrong? No, imposible. He had felt the vibration, seen the symptoms. Thrion radiation poisoning was real, and Xena was dying. But no one would listen to a disgraced janitor with a history of failure. The irony was bitter. 5 years ago, if he had made the same diagnosis wearing an engineer's uniform, people would have listened. They would have acted immediately. But now, wearing coveralls instead of a professional badge, his expertise meant nothing. His past mistake had erased everything he had achieved before it. James thought about the prototype engine that had exploded. He had triple-checked every calculation, verified every component. The failure had been in a subcontractor's work, a faulty seal that none of them had detected. But he had been the project lead and someone had to take the fall. His career had been the sacrifice that allowed others to continue working. He had accepted it, even understood it. But he had never imagined that his fall from grace would someday cost a child's life. Hours passed. James dozed fitfully on the uncomfortable bench, jerking awake periodically with visions of Xena's crystallizing arms. He imagined the formation spreading, creeping across her small body like ice consuming a window pane. He saw her amber eyes dimming as the poison reached her vital organs. Just before dawn, station time, a soft chime indicated someone at his cell door. James looked up, expecting Rodriguez or another security officer. Instead, he saw a woman in a medical uniform, human, with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun. Her badge identified her as Dr. Sarah Chin, Chief Medical Officer. "Mr. Carter," she said quietly, "we need to talk about the Thrion radiation." James stood up so quickly he felt dizzy. "You believe me?" "I'm not sure yet," Dr. Chin replied carefully. "But I reviewed the security footage from last night. I saw your face when you touched the ambassador's daughter. That wasn't the expression of someone with inappropriate intentions. That was the face of someone who had just made a terrible diagnosis. So I looked into your background. You wrote a graduate thesis on exotic radiation types. You worked on experimental fusion containment systems. You know what you're talking about." Hope surged in James's chest. "How is Xena?" Dr. Chen's expression darkened. "Her condition has deteriorated significantly in the last 6 hours. The crystalline formations have spread to her torso. Her parents finally brought her to medical when she started coughing up blood. We can't identify what's wrong with her. Every scan comes back normal. Because your scanners aren't calibrated for quantum frequency radiation," James said urgently. "You need to reconfigure them to detect wavelengths between 0.03 and 0.08 terahertz. That's where the Thrion radiation operates." "That's extremely specific knowledge," Dr. Chin observed. "I spent 2 years studying it," James replied. "I was convinced it would be the next major safety challenge in deep space engineering. Everyone else thought I was paranoid, chasing theoretical dangers. Turns out I was right, just 5 years too early to be taken seriously." Dr. Chin pulled out a data pad. "If you're correct, where would this radiation be coming from?" "The fusion core," James said immediately. "Specifically, somewhere in the containment field generators or the cooling systems. My guess is someone modified the reactor without properly updating the shielding. The radiation is leaking through the ventilation system, spreading throughout the residential sectors. Anyone who spends significant time near those vents could be exposed." "Dear God," Dr. Chin whispered. "The children's play area. It's directly below the main ventilation hub." "That's where I found Xena," James confirmed. "How many children use that area regularly?" "Dozens," Dr. Chin replied, her face pale. "Human and Valkyrian both." "Then Xena isn't the only victim," James said grimly. "You need to scan all the children immediately. And you need to shut down that fusion core before anyone else gets poisoned." Dr. Chin stared at him for a long moment, making a decision that could cost her career if she was wrong. Finally she nodded. "Come with me. We're going to medical. If Ambassador Kalira objects, I'll handle it. But if you're right, we don't have time for politics." She opened the cell door. James stepped out into the corridor, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders once again. He had been given a second chance to save lives. This time he couldn't afford to fail. As they hurried toward the medical wing, neither of them noticed the faint tremor that ran through the station's walls, a subtle vibration that marked the beginning of something far worse than anyone had anticipated. The truth emerges. The medical wing of Meridian Station was chaos. Dr. Chin moved through the corridors with practiced efficiency, James following close behind. Every examination room seemed occupied, medical staff rushing between patients with expressions of controlled panic. Through observation windows, James caught glimpses of small bodies on diagnostic beds, both human and Valkyrian children displaying the telltale crystalline formations he had seen on Xena. When did this start? James asked, his voice tight with concern. About 2 hours ago, Dr. Chin replied without slowing her pace. Parents started bringing their children in with similar symptoms. Skin crystallization, internal vibrations, respiratory distress. We have 11 cases now and more arriving every few minutes. 11 children. The number hit James like a punch to the gut. If he had been believed last night, if someone had listened instead of arresting him, treatment could have started hours ago. But dwelling on that wouldn't help anyone now. They reached the intensive care unit where Ambassador Kalira stood outside a sealed room, her formal robes wrinkled and disheveled. Her usual composure had cracked, revealing the terrified mother beneath the diplomatic facade. When she saw James, her amber eyes flashed with anger. What is he doing here? Kalira demanded. That man should be awaiting deportation, not walking freely through medical. Ambassador, Mr. Carter may be our only chance to save your daughter, Dr. Chin said firmly. And the 10 other children currently suffering from the same condition. 10 others. Kalira's voice wavered. How is that possible? You said Xena had a rare infection. Because we didn't know what we were looking at, Dr. Chin admitted. But Mr. Carter does. He identified it last night. The ion radiation poisoning. Kalira turned to stare at James, her expression a complicated mix of emotions. You were serious about that? Completely serious, James replied. Ambassador, I understand why you didn't believe me. I'm just a janitor with a failed career. But before that failure, I was a good engineer. And I know radiation physics better than almost anyone on this station. Your daughter is dying and so are those other children. Let me help them. For a long moment, Kalira said nothing. Then she stepped aside, gesturing toward the observation window. Explain what I'm seeing. James approached the window and looked inside. Xena lay on a medical bed surrounded by monitoring equipment. The crystalline formations had spread dramatically since last night, covering most of her visible skin in delicate, luminescent patterns. Her breathing was labored, each breath rattling in her chest. The sight made James's heart clench. The ion radiation is a quantum frequency emission that most standard equipment can't detect, James explained, forcing himself into analytical mode. It interacts with organic tissue at a molecular level, causing the water in cells to crystallize. The process starts at the skin and works inward. Without treatment, it will reach her heart and lungs within 48 hours. At that point, the damage becomes irreversible. Why can't our scanners detect it? Kalira asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Because it exists in a frequency range that conventional sensors don't monitor, James replied. It's like trying to hear a dog whistle with human ears. The radiation is there, but your equipment is blind to it. However, there's another way to detect it. He held up his hand. Human nervous systems, specifically those trained in sensitive tactile work, can feel the vibration the ion radiation creates in affected tissue. It's how I identified it on Xena last night. I felt the frequency resonance when I touched her arm. Dr. Chin pulled out her data pad. That's why you were so specific about the scanner recalibration frequencies. You've actually studied this phenomenon. I wrote my graduate thesis on it, James confirmed. Everyone thought I was wasting my time on theoretical dangers. But I ran models, calculated exposure rates, identified symptoms. I knew this day would come eventually. I just never imagined I'd be a janitor when it happened. Ambassador Kalira studied him with new eyes, seeing past the gray coveralls to the expert underneath. If you're correct about the source being our fusion core, how did this happen? We have the most advanced safety systems in known space. Someone modified the reactor, James said grimly. Based on the exposure pattern I've been tracking for 3 days, my guess is they increased the power output without properly upgrading the containment shielding. The extra energy is bleeding through microscopic gaps in the field generators, traveling through the ventilation system to the residential areas. That's impossible, Kalira protested. Access to the fusion core requires multiple authorizations. No one could modify it without approval from the engineering board. Unless someone on the engineering board authorized it, Dr. Chin suggested quietly. Or someone with enough technical knowledge to bypass the security protocols. James nodded. Either way, we have 2 immediate priorities. First, treat the children who've been exposed. Second, identify and shut down the radiation source before anyone else gets poisoned. How do we treat them? Kalira asked desperately. If our equipment can't even detect the radiation, how do we counteract it? That's the complicated part, James admitted. The ion radiation crystallization can be reversed, but it requires a very specific treatment protocol. We need to use harmonic resonance to break down the crystalline structures at the molecular level, then flush the contaminated cells from the body. Think of it like using sound waves to shatter glass. Dr. Chen's eyes widened. Sonic therapy combined with chelation treatment. That could work, but we'd need to calibrate the sonic frequencies precisely. Too high or too low and we'd cause more damage. The frequencies are in my thesis research, James said. I can provide exact specifications. But we'll also need to combine human and Valkyrian medical approaches. Human chelation drugs won't work effectively on Valkyrian physiology, and vice versa. We need to create a hybrid treatment. That's never been done before, Dr. Chen said slowly. The Medical Ethics Board would need months to approve human alien treatment protocols. These children don't have months, James replied sharply. They have hours. Maybe a day if we're lucky. The Ethics Board can debate the precedent after we save their lives. Ambassador Kalira looked through the window at her daughter, watching the crystalline formations pulse with faint light. Her expression hardened with resolve. Do it. Whatever you need, Dr. Chen. I'll take full responsibility. If the Ethics Board wants to prosecute someone for unauthorized treatment protocols, they can prosecute me. Dr. Chen smiled slightly. With respect, Ambassador, they'll have to get in line behind me. Mr. Carter, let's get to work. The next several hours blurred into intense activity. James worked alongside Dr. Chen and her medical team, translating his theoretical research into practical application. They reconfigured medical scanners to detect the quantum frequency radiation, confirming James's diagnosis in all 11 children. The scans also revealed 3 more cases in early stages, children who had been exposed but not yet developed visible symptoms. James designed the sonic therapy equipment, adapting existing medical devices to generate the precise frequencies needed to break down the crystalline formations. Dr. Chen worked with both human and Valkyrian pharmacologists to create the hybrid chelation treatment, combining Earth-based compounds with Valkyrian cellular regenerators. Meanwhile, Station Security had launched an investigation into the fusion core modifications. Chief of Security Okoye, a no-nonsense woman with 20 years of military experience, personally led the team examining the reactor systems. James was calibrating the sonic therapy device when Okoye entered the medical lab, her expression grim. Mr. Carter, Dr. Chen, you need to see this. They followed her to a secure briefing room where holographic displays showed schematics of the fusion core. A section of the containment field generators glowed red, indicating the problem area. We found the leak, Okoye said, highlighting the damaged section. Someone deliberately weakened the containment field in Sector 4, creating a gap that allows quantum frequency radiation to escape. The modifications were sophisticated, designed to look like normal wear and tear. Who had access? Dr. Chen asked. That's where it gets interesting, Okoye replied. The modifications required high-level engineering knowledge and administrative access to the reactor systems. We've narrowed it down to 3 people on the engineering board. We're bringing them in for questioning now. Wait, James said, studying the holographic display more carefully. Can you show me the power output logs for the last 6 months? Okoye pulled up the data. James examined the graphs, his engineering mind analyzing the patterns. There, he pointed. The power increases started 4 months ago, small increments every few weeks. Whoever did this was testing the modifications gradually, seeing how much they could push the system before someone noticed. But why? Dr. Chen wondered. What's the benefit of increasing reactor output? Money, Ambassador Kalira said from the doorway. She had been listening quietly. The station operates on contracted power allocations. If someone could secretly increase output and sell the excess energy to unauthorized clients, they could make a fortune. Exactly, James confirmed. This wasn't an accident or negligence. This was deliberate criminal activity. Someone valued profit over the lives of children. Okoye's expression turned cold. We'll find them. In the meantime, we need to shut down the compromised section and repair the containment field. How long will that take? Dr. Chen asked. With proper safety protocols, 48 hours minimum, Okoye replied. We don't have 48 hours, James said urgently. Some of these children are already critical. We need to stop the radiation leak now, even if it's temporary. I can't authorize an emergency shutdown without engineering board approval, Okoye protested. The safety risks are too high. James stood up, decision crystallizing in his mind. Then I'll do it. I know fusion containment systems better than anyone on this station. I can implement a temporary patch that will hold long enough for proper repairs. You're not an authorized engineer anymore, Okoye reminded him. If something goes wrong, if anyone gets hurt, you'll face criminal charges. Real ones this time, not just deportation. I know, James replied quietly. But I can't stand by and watch children die because of bureaucracy and my damaged reputation. This is what I was trained to do. Let me do it. Ambassador Kalira stepped forward. If Mr. Carter is willing to take that risk, I authorize it. As senior diplomatic representative on this station, I invoke Emergency Protocol 7. Chief Okoye, provide Mr. Carter with whatever access and support he needs. Okoye hesitated, then nodded. Understood, Ambassador. Mr. Carter, you'll have a security escort and a medical team on standby. But if anything looks unstable, you abort immediately. Clear? Clear, James agreed. 30 minutes later, James stood in the engineering section of the fusion core, surrounded by humming machinery and flickering displays. The radiation here was intense, even through his protective suit. His escort, a young security officer named Martinez, watched nervously from the doorway. James opened the containment field generator panel, revealing the intricate systems inside. Years of engineering experience guided his hands as he assessed the damage. The sabotage was clever, almost invisible unless you knew exactly what to look for. Whoever had done this was highly skilled. He pulled out diagnostic tools and began working, rerouting power flows and reinforcing weak points in the containment field. It was delicate work, like defusing a bomb while the timer counted down. One wrong connection could cause a catastrophic failure. How's it looking? Martinez called. Complicated, James replied without taking his eyes off his work. But doable. I need another 10 minutes. Those 10 minutes felt like hours. James's hands worked with mechanical precision, muscle memory from thousands of hours of engineering work guiding each movement. He could feel the heat from the reactor through his gloves, sensed the massive power barely contained by the systems he was repairing. Finally, he made the last connection and activated the temporary patch. The containment field display flickered, then stabilized. The red warning indicators shifted to yellow caution status. Not perfect but safe enough for now. Field stabilized, James announced, allowing himself to breathe. Radiation leak is contained. We need permanent repairs within 72 hours, but this will hold until then. Martinez grinned with relief. Good work, sir. Let's get you back to medical. Back in the medical wing, Dr. Chen had begun administering the hybrid treatment to the most critical patients. James watched through observation windows as Zena received the first dose of the sonic therapy combined with chelation drugs. The crystalline formations on her skin began to break down, the delicate structures fragmenting and dissolving. Over the next 12 hours, all 14 children responded to the treatment. The crystallization reversed, the quantum frequency vibrations faded, and normal cellular function resumed. Zena was among the first to wake, her amber eyes clear and focused for the first time in days. Ambassador Kalira sat at her daughter's bedside, holding her hand and crying softly. When James checked on them, she looked up with an expression of profound gratitude. Thank you, she whispered. I was so wrong about you. I nearly cost my daughter her life because I judged you by your position rather than your knowledge. You were protecting her, James replied gently. That's what mothers do. I understand. No, Kalira insisted. There's no excuse for the prejudice I showed. You identified the problem, you provided the solution, and you risked your freedom to save children you didn't even know. That's not the behavior of a disgraced engineer. That's the behavior of a hero. James felt uncomfortable with the praise. I just did what anyone with my training would do. But you did it despite everything this station took from you, Kalira countered. Despite being reduced to janitorial work, despite the accusations I made. You helped anyway. That speaks to character, not just competence. 2 days later, Chief Okoye's investigation concluded. The saboteur was revealed to be Marcus Venn, a senior engineer on the station's board. He had been secretly selling excess reactor power to mining operations in the outer system, making enormous profits while endangering everyone on the station. The evidence was overwhelming and Venn was arrested along with 3 accomplices. The station administration held a formal hearing to address James's role in the crisis. He stood before a panel of administrators, diplomats, and engineers, prepared to face consequences for his unauthorized actions. Instead, he found himself receiving something entirely unexpected. Station Director Williams, an older human with decades of administrative experience, spoke first. Mr. Carter, your actions during this crisis demonstrated exceptional expertise, courage, and moral character. The investigation into your previous engineering failure has been reopened in light of new evidence. The faulty seal that caused the explosion was traced to deliberate sabotage by the same contractor group working with Marcus Venn. You were not at fault. James felt the words wash over him, barely able to process them. 5 years of guilt and shame suddenly lifted, leaving him dizzy. Furthermore, Williams continued, we are offering you the position of Chief Safety Engineer for Meridian Station, with full restoration of your engineering credentials. Your salary will reflect the importance of this role, and you will have authority to implement safety protocols across all station systems. Ambassador Kalira stood from the diplomatic section. The Velkarian sovereignty endorses this appointment. We also formally apologize for the prejudicial treatment Mr. Carter received, both historically and during this recent crisis. We have much to learn from humanity about perseverance and integrity. James looked around the chamber, seeing respect in faces that had once dismissed him as just a janitor. But what mattered most was the thought of those 14 children, now healthy and playing in the recreation areas, unaware of how close they had come to death. I accept the position, James said quietly. Thank you for this opportunity. I promise I won't waste it. 3 weeks later, James stood in his new office, reviewing safety protocols for the station's environmental systems. His engineering uniform felt strange after years in coveralls, but also right, like reclaiming a part of himself he thought was lost forever. A chime at his door announced a visitor. Xena entered, accompanied by her mother. The girl was completely healed, no trace of the crystalline formations remaining. She wore a simple dress and carried something carefully in her hands. Mr. Carter, Xena said formally, then smiled. I mean Chief Engineer Carter. I made something for you. She held out a small bracelet woven from colorful threads, both Earth-style and Velkarian materials mixed together. It's a friendship bracelet, she explained. On my world we give them to people who save our lives. It means you're part of our family now. James knelt down and allowed her to tie the bracelet around his wrist. The gesture touched him more deeply than any formal commendation. Thank you, Xena. I'll wear it with pride. You saved me, Xena said simply. Even when everyone said you were wrong. Even when they arrested you. You knew I was sick and you didn't give up. That's what real heroes do. After they left, James stood at his office window looking out at the stars. The bracelet on his wrist caught the light, its mixed threads symbolizing something important, the potential for different peoples to work together, to learn from each other, to create something stronger than either could build alone. He thought about his journey from respected engineer to disgraced janitor to chief safety engineer. The path had been painful, humbling, but ultimately redemptive. His failure had taught him empathy. His time as a janitor had taught him to see things others missed. And his determination to help, regardless of personal cost, had revealed the kind of person he truly was. The station hummed around him, thousands of humans and aliens living and working together in the cold vastness of space. It was imperfect, sometimes prejudiced, occasionally dangerous. But it was also hopeful, a testament to what could be achieved when people chose cooperation over division. James Carter smiled, touched the friendship bracelet on his wrist, and returned to his work. There were safety protocols to review, systems to inspect, and lives to protect. He was an engineer again, but more importantly, he was exactly where he was meant to be. The janitor who nobody saw had become the guardian everyone relied on. And in saving those children, he had saved himself.